A routine traffic stop turns hostile. Two officers smirk as they arrest a black woman, planting drugs she's never seen before. She doesn't fight, just watches silently. In court, they sit back, smug. But when the judge says, "Please rise, Agent Carter," the room goes silent. One mistake. One powerful twist. Nobody saw this coming. Aaliyah Carter was born and raised in Newark, New Jersey, a city where beauty and struggle lived side by side. Her father, a respected pastor, and her mother, a hard-working nurse, taught her that strength came not from how loud you spoke, but from how you carried yourself when no one believed in you. She saw injustice up close. Classmates arrested for petty offenses while others walked free. Friends lost to the streets, not because they were bad kids, but because they ran out of chances. Even as a child, Aaliyah could see the system wasn't built to protect everyone equally. By high school, she was laser-focused. While others doubted her, she graduated with honors and went straight into criminal justice. Aaliyah joined the military straight out of college and served with distinction. That's where federal agencies noticed her. Her calm under pressure, her sharp instincts, and her ability to read people without saying a word. The DEA recruited her not long after. She accepted, not for the badge, the paycheck, or the prestige, but because her neighborhood needed people on the inside. People who could protect it from being torn apart by poison masked as profit. Within a few years, she'd become one of the youngest agents in her division. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, but always watching, always calculating, always making sure she could outsmart, not just outrun, the danger. But no matter how high she climbed, Aaliyah never forgot one thing. To some, she'd never be a hero, just a black woman in the wrong place at the wrong time. That day, she was off duty. No badge. No vest. No agency SUV. Just Aaliyah, in jeans and a hoodie, driving home after visiting her baby niece. She didn't expect to be pulled over. She definitely didn't expect what would happen next. But she didn't panic. She had seen worse. And she knew who she was, even if they didn't. It was supposed to be a quiet evening. Aaliyah Carter had just left her sister's house, still smiling from playing peekaboo with her baby niece. The air was cool, the sun just starting to fade. Her playlist hummed low through the speakers as she drove through a quiet suburban neighborhood on her way back to the city. Then the red and blue lights lit up behind her. She didn't panic, just eased her car to the side, turned off the engine, and kept her hands visible. A routine stop, she thought. Maybe a tail light she didn't know about. She stayed calm, rolled the window down, and waited. Two white officers approached, stiff and already tense. "You matched a description," one said curtly. Aaliyah raised an eyebrow. "What kind of description?" "Female, black, driving a dark sedan. That's all we need." Her registration and license were in order. The car was clean, spotless, nothing out of place. She handed everything over smoothly, politely. No sudden movements. No attitude. Still, their eyes stayed sharp. Suspicious. The second officer circled the car, flashlight scanning like he was looking for trouble, or creating it. Then came the signal. "Ma'am, step out of the car." Aaliyah complied, saying little. Her instincts told her this wasn't about procedure. It was performance. They started searching without permission. Her rights violated in real time. She stayed still, letting them dig their own hole. Then one of them called out with theatrical flair, "Bingo!" He held up a small plastic baggie. Pills inside. Found it under the driver's seat. Aaliyah's jaw tightened. She didn't speak. She knew those pills hadn't been there before. She also knew better than to argue. The trap had already been set. Cuffs clicked around her wrists. The other officer smirked. "Guess someone's going away for a long time." Aaliyah looked him dead in the eye. Still silent. In that moment, she wasn't Agent Carter. She wasn't federal law enforcement. She was just another black woman in the wrong place at the wrong time. But they didn't know who they'd just framed. And they were about to find out. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as the case was called. State versus Aaliyah Carter. Aaliyah walked in wearing a modest blouse and slacks. No badge, no armor. Just calm eyes and quiet confidence. She looked every bit the picture of grace under pressure, but to the people in that courtroom, she was just another defendant with a public defender. The two officers sat smugly at the front. Clean-shaven, polished, uniforms crisp, everything about them screamed credibility. They carried the air of men who had done this before and had never been questioned. The first officer took the stand. She seemed nervous when we pulled her over. Wouldn't look us in the eye. That's usually a red flag. The second added with mock sympathy, she had no good reason to be in that neighborhood. I think she tried to toss the baggie under the seat when she saw us approach. We just did our jobs. The judge nodded, taking notes. The prosecutor leaned forward, confident. It all sounded so routine, so believable. Aaliyah sat still at the defense table. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her public defender, a young, overworked attorney, did his best. He questioned inconsistencies, raised the issue of racial profiling, asked why no fingerprints were tested on the bag of pills. But the judge looked unimpressed. Counsel, if you're suggesting officers planted evidence, you'll need more than theory. The prosecutor snorted quietly, already convinced this was a slam dunk. Then Aaliyah leaned toward her lawyer and whispered, "Request to address the court." He blinked. "You sure?" She nodded. "It's time." Permission was granted. Aaliyah stood and walked to the center of the courtroom. The officers smirked, amused by her last-ditch effort. She began, calm and direct. "Your Honor, may I enter something into the record?" The judge raised an eyebrow. "You're not under oath. What is it you'd like to add?" Aaliyah reached into her folder, pulled out a single laminated card, and held it up for the room to see. DEA credentials. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. "My name is Special Agent Aaliyah Carter, badge number 5472-619. I have served in federal law enforcement for the past 8 years. That day, I was on personal leave. I chose not to speak before now because I wanted to see how far this lie would go." Mouths dropped. The prosecutor turned pale. The public defender nearly choked. The officers froze. Aaliyah turned to them slowly. "You didn't find drugs. You planted them. You didn't see guilt. You saw skin. And now, everyone sees what you are." Dead silence. The judge cleared his throat, flustered. "We'll take a recess. Immediately." But the damage was done. The truth had detonated in the middle of the courtroom. And justice, finally, had begun to wake up. The silence following Aaliyah's revelation hung in the air like a thundercloud ready to burst. She stepped forward, holding her credentials with steady hands. Her voice, unwavering. "My name is Special Agent Aaliyah Carter. I work for the Drug Enforcement Administration." The courtroom gasped. Whispers shot through the rows like sparks. The judge leaned forward, stunned. "You're a federal agent?" She nodded. "That's correct, Your Honor. I have been working undercover for nearly a year on a joint task force investigating internal corruption tied to a drug trafficking operation. These two officers, Dolan and Myers, have been on our radar for months." All eyes snapped to the officers, who suddenly looked very, very small in their uniforms. Aaliyah continued, her tone calm but sharp. "I was instructed not to blow my cover, even after this arrest. But after witnessing their perjury today and the manipulation of this court, it's time to conclude the operation." She opened a folder and handed it to the judge. "These are surveillance logs, marked bills, and internal communications tying officers Dolan and Myers to known members of a distribution ring." The prosecutor, dumbfounded, tried to interject. Your Honor, I had no knowledge. But before he could finish, 2 U.S. Marshals entered the courtroom from a side door. They moved with quiet urgency, badges already out. Officers Dolan and Myers, one marshal announced, you are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, possession with intent to distribute, and civil rights violations. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. The officers stood, faces pale. Dolan stammered, "This is a mistake. She's lying. She's setting us up." Aaliyah turned to him with unblinking clarity. "I warned you to be careful what you plant. You never considered who might be watching." As the marshals cuffed them, Myers barked, "You're ruining our lives." Aaliyah replied coldly, "No. You did that yourselves. I just exposed the truth." The judge, regaining composure, slammed the gavel. "Court is adjourned. Bailiffs, clear the courtroom." As the disgraced officers were escorted out, the same crowd that had judged Aaliyah moments earlier now watched her with awe. Reporters outside the courtroom caught the news within minutes. Camera crews swarmed. One journalist asked, "Agent Carter, any comment?" She paused at the top of the courthouse steps. Then, with perfect clarity, answered, "Being a black woman with a badge doesn't protect you from injustice. But it does give you the power to fight it from both sides." She didn't wait for applause. She turned and walked down the steps, not as a victim, not just as a federal agent, but as someone who'd flipped the script on an entire system. And justice, for once, looked like her. Within 24 hours of the courtroom bombshell, the story made national headlines. DEA agent outs dirty cops in courtroom twist, blared across every major news outlet. Clips of Aaliyah revealing her badge and the marshals arresting the officers played on a loop. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #AgentCarter and #JusticeServed trended for days. Officers Dolan and Myers were transferred to a federal holding facility, facing a storm of charges. Conspiracy, corruption, perjury, obstruction of justice, civil rights violations, and evidence tampering. If convicted, they were looking at decades behind bars. The public reaction was split, but not how many expected. For once, the usual skepticism toward black defendants turned into an outpouring of respect for Aaliyah Carter. People who had been silent about injustice found themselves moved, inspired. Mothers posted photos of their daughters in toy badges. Veterans praised her discipline. Law students cited her case in debates. At the courthouse, Judge Klein, who had seemed dismissive during the trial, made an unusual move. He held a press conference and looked directly into the cameras. "Agent Carter exposed not just the truth about 2 officers," he said, "but also the blind spots within our own courtroom. I offer her my public apology for doubting her, for letting bias cloud my judgment." It was rare, raw, and it echoed across the legal world. But Aaliyah Carter? She didn't show up for any interviews. She wasn't on talk shows or social media. She quietly returned to her work at the DEA. When a journalist finally caught her leaving the field office and asked why she hadn't spoken out, she gave a short, firm answer. "I did my job. That's enough." Yet her impact couldn't be contained. Community groups began inviting her to speak, not about the case, but about resilience. Churches, schools, and nonprofits all asked for her story. She turned most of them down. Not because she was avoiding the spotlight, but because she knew something bigger was coming. Behind the scenes, the State Bureau of Internal Affairs launched new investigations across precincts. They opened hundreds of closed complaints. A statewide audit of evidence handling procedures was initiated. More officers, some high-ranking, suddenly found themselves under review. And though Aaliyah had said little, her presence loomed large. At precincts across the state, her name was whispered not with bitterness, but with caution. She had become a symbol. To the public, a quiet hero. To law enforcement, a reminder that no badge makes you untouchable. To corrupt officers, a warning. Respect the oath, Or she might be the one sitting in the courtroom next time. Watching. Listening. Waiting. And for those who truly wore the badge with honor, she gave them something else: hope. Hope that accountability was possible. That the system could police itself, even when it didn't want to. That justice could, just maybe, wear a black woman's face and speak in a voice calm but unstoppable. Aaliyah Carter never needed applause. Her silence was the statement. Weeks had passed since the courtroom flipped on its head. The buzz had faded from headlines, though whispers still echoed in precincts and offices across the state. But for Aaliyah Carter, the world hadn't paused. Justice didn't stop because people were finally paying attention. It kept moving, and so did she. It was just after midnight. Aaliyah sat in an unmarked black sedan parked outside a low-lit warehouse on the edge of Trenton. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet only people who've lived through danger know isn't peace, it's pressure. She watched as a few figures moved through the shadows, unaware that federal eyes were on them. Another case. Another operation. Another web to unwind. Beside her sat her new partner, Special Agent Devin Brooks, young, eager, and still getting used to her rhythm. He had seen the viral video. The arrest. The headlines. Everyone had. But he hadn't yet asked about it. Until now. "You never said," he began cautiously, glancing over at her. "Did it feel good? What happened in court?" Aaliyah didn't look at him at first. She kept her eyes on the warehouse, hands steady on the wheel. Then she exhaled slowly and nodded once. "Justice doesn't feel good," she said, her voice calm. "It feels right." There was silence between them, but not the awkward kind. The kind filled with unspoken weight. She knew the truth. Court victories fade, but the fight never ends. Those officers weren't anomalies. They were proof of a larger disease. And while some celebrated her as a hero, others in quiet corners likely called her a traitor. But she didn't care about any of that. She wasn't doing this for applause. She never had. A crackle of static came over the radio. The moment had passed. Back to work. Hours later, as the sun rose and the operation wound down, Aaliyah found herself near the courthouse again. Not by plan, just part of the route back. The building stood there like it always had, old, tall, stone-faced. A symbol of justice, though too often blind in the wrong ways. She parked the car and stepped out for a moment. Wearing plain clothes, her badge tucked away beneath her jacket, she walked along the courthouse steps, not with ceremony, but with certainty. A woman on her path. No fanfare. No flash. A few people passed her. No one stopped. No one recognized her. And that was fine. She paused at the base of the steps, looked up at the tall columns, then gave a small nod to herself and turned away. Because it was never about being seen. It was about seeing the corruption, the cracks, the pain others chose to ignore, and doing something about it, even if it meant going alone. Never mistake silence for weakness. Some of us are just waiting for the right moment to speak. And with that, she disappeared into the morning light, unnoticed, unshaken, and undefeated.